Hello, everybody. We are starting off on my favorite section, social culture and anthropology. This is based off the reading window on Humanity Chapter 2. And this lecture and tomorrow's lecture, or not tomorrow, then the next lecture is going to really go over the basics of what social culture and anthropology is. And after that, we're going to get into some fun stuff. Okay. So before we do that, though, nothing crazy. This week there's a quiz and a reflection due at the end of the week. Next week we will have the midterm, I believe. Next week, yes, that's correct. That feels a little early, but if not, I will modify it in the announcements and stuff. Don't worry, it'll be obvious. But yeah, I think actually no, it is next week because because this week we're just doing the social cultural, and then you'll be done with 2 sections already out of 4, so you'll be pretty close to it being done. Okay, so yeah. Anyway, so next week we'll have midterm. I'll post like details about that. Obviously, I'm pre-recording this, so I don't have it ready yet, but it'll be ready in the next few lectures. All right. All right, so while I'm going over this information, I want you to think about what is the main difference between something being natural and something being cultural, right? So if you think about culture, well, actually, what we'll talk about later, but the opposite of that is nature, essentially, right? And I put those in quotations because depending on what situation we're talking about, it could be a different meaning. So, what is the main difference between something being cultural and something being natural? Okay. All right. So, social code anthropology is a study of human society and culture. This stuff you'll describe as analyze, interprets, and explains social and cultural similarities and differences. Pretty straightforward, right? If you remember from the first lecture, or not the first lecture, the second lecture, introducing the 4 fields, it's more importantly shows us what is and what isn't human, right? It kind of like unintentionally investigates like, okay, what makes us human? Because culture and like many things in anthropology, culture is something that's very distinctive to human and something that dictates a lot of our life, right? Yeah. So let's go over the definition one more time. Culture is that complex whole which includes knowledge, belief, arts, morals, law, custom, and any other capabilities and habits acquired by man as a member of society, right? Now, the two things I want you to pay attention to here is acquired and as a member of society, right? So acquired means to obtain. The reason why I don't love this word in this definition is that you cannot obtain culture. Not because you can't have it, but because it's always changing. If you are someone that is or knows someone that is from another country, you'll know that, or sorry, if you're from or have visited another country, you'll know that if you go back there in 10 years, it's going to be different, right? Does that mean that you don't understand the culture of that country when you went there? Of course not. It just means that things are changing all the time. Okay. And as a member of society, that's very important, right? Everyone is a member of society. Everyone, whether they want to be or not to be, or sorry, whether they want to or not to, right? It's not something that's voluntary. You are, you aren't. And the only way to not be part of a society is if you're like isolated, like from everybody and everything, which is impossible almost in our current society. Okay, so keep those 2 little points in mind. Now, enculturation is the process that people go through to learn culture, right? People acquire culture by growing up in a particular society in which they're exposed to a specific cultural tradition. Enculturation is the process by which a child learns his or her culture, right? So, enculturation technically can be for adults as well, but if you read about this outside of this class, it's usually referring to children, right? And it's like how they grow up in a culture and how they learn it, right? Now, I need you to open up your mind a little bit because when we're talking about learning about culture, we're not just talking about you learning directly. We're also talking about indirectly, and that's why exposed is very important, right? And we'll go deeper into that in the next couple slides. So, culture is learned, right? Humans uniquely learn through symbols. Symbols are signs that have no necessary natural connection to the things they stand for or signify. Now, humans learn through 3 different mediums, right? Experience, social, and observation. Now, to better understand this, I want you to imagine a classroom and a teacher's asking what's 2 plus 2, right? experience. Experience is you raise your hand. I'm sorry, you don't raise your hand. You yell out the answer. It's 4, and then the teacher's like, "All right, Jason, you're gonna sit out for a timeout because you're not supposed to do this and that." That is you experiencing the punishment or the penalty or the whatever from not following the cultural norm, right? That's experience. You're going through the penalty or whatever. Social is, you're about to yell out the answer, but your friend's like, "Oh, wait, hold on, we don't yell here, right? We don't yell here, right?" That is social. Okay. That's like exactly what it sounds like. Okay. And finally, observational, right? Observational is when you see other people not yelling. So you're about to yell out the answer, and you look around and you're like, "Oh, no one else is yelling out the answer, and everyone's raising their hands, so I better raise my hand," right? These are the 3 ways in which we learn cultural norms. Okay. And they can apply to any cultural norm you can think of. Okay. Sometimes culture is taught directly, but it's also internalized indirectly. So, like, for example, I don't know, like, I'm trying to think of a good example for you. If you were to, what's something that everyone kind of knows? Oh, if someone was to tell you, how to, trying to think of something that is not taught. Oh, best example, right? When I was younger, it was really in fashion to be like having baggy clothes. Obviously, my parents were not a fan of baggy clothes, but because of the things that I observed and my own social experience with, seeing my friends and all this other stuff, and then after that, the experience of being validated that, oh, baggy clothes are cool, I learned that baggy clothes are cool for during that time, right? So if you use that as an example, that's kind of experiencing that cultural norm in those 3 levels. Okay. How are some ways that people learn culture? How could culture affect the future of said person? So this one is it's pretty obvious, right? You learn culture by living your life, right? And how do we live our lives, right? We spend a lot of time with our families, spend a lot of time at school, we spend a lot of time at work. So the question really is, what's the purpose of school? A lot of people think the purpose of school is to teach you knowledge. Yeah, it is, but not really, right? And especially if any of you end up going to graduate school, it becomes very obvious, right? A lot of, well, at least for me, like when you go to graduate school in anthropology, all they literally care about is anthropology, right? And that's different because they are literally concerned about you learning stuff or that you're exploring stuff. But I would say K through 12 and even K through regular college, it's more about understanding how to function as a person in this society, right? If you think about school, it's really training you to be part of the workforce, right? In many ways, right? Little ways and big ways. Big ways, that following a schedule, being on time, leaving on time. Learning how to communicate with teachers is similar to learning how to communicate with your boss, right? So if you wanted to email me, but hey, Professor Fong, I'm having issue, blah, 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 sincerely, John or whatever, you're learning that skill in school. Now, let me give you another great example is preschool. Preschool is especially true for this, right? What are you really learning in preschool? You have to think about what are they really learning in preschool? They're just playing all the time. What are they really learning? They're learning important skills like, oh, lining up. Oh, saying good morning to the teacher, signing in, being away from their parents, so on and so forth, right? And it's very obvious when you go to kindergarten which kids have and have not gone to preschool because, again, preschool is there to help you culturally prepare for school. Okay, great. Now, culture is shared. Culture is an attribute not of individuals per se, but of individuals as members of groups. Enculturation unifies people by providing us with common experiences. Today's parents for yesterday's children. Very little of what we think is original or unique. Okay, so let's go over these one by one. Culture is an attribute not of individuals per se, but of individuals as members of groups. What that is trying to say is just that you have to be part of a society to have culture, right? You can't just be by yourself creating culture. Enculturation, the process of learning culture, unifies people by providing us with common experiences. Okay, common experiences. So that's very important. So, for example, if you went to high school in America, we can all talk about because I'm not from New York, but I'm from San Francisco, we can all talk about school lunch, right? If we went to high school in America, I don't know, we can all talk about going to school, period, right? Or we can all talk about taking a standardized test, or how we dealt with the SAT, or whatever, right? Whether you took it or not, it's a different story, but you know of it, right? These are experiences that unite us. Going to McDonald's, whatever. These are experiences that we have in common, okay? And today's Parents USA Children, the reason why I put this in here is because you have to understand that, or actually this connects to the next one too. Very little what we think is original unique. I just put that in there just to kind of like, just to kind of like give you a little shock factor. But what I'm really trying to say is that culture is scaffolding. And what does that mean? In order to scaffold, you need to have something there to begin with, right? So it's stacking on top of each other all the time. Okay. Now, in what direction it stacks it doesn't matter. But the main point is that you never have a thought that isn't built off of previous thoughts, right? So for example, like fashion, right? Fashion, if you've never you cannot imagine something by yourself. You have to base it off of fashion that you've seen before, right? You have to base it off the things you've seen before. Okay. And why? What does that mean? But what I'm trying to say is every thought that we have, every culture that we have, is built off of our previous understandings or previous experience. Okay. So, another great one. And they did a study that said women crave chocolate, when they're on the period because chocolate has magnesium. Okay, that's cool. Well, would you crave chocolate as a woman if you never had chocolate before? If you didn't know what chocolate was? No. Just because you crave magnesium doesn't mean you crave chocolate, right? Now it's the same thing. You can only crave that thing if you've been exposed to it. Does that make sense? You can only think about certain things if you have some kind of prior experience with it. Okay. Now I know this sounds kind of random, but trust me, it'll all come together later. So people tend to spend time with others that share cultural backgrounds. This often leads to being with people that share values and thus have similar opinions. Now, this is very important because when we say cultural background, people automatically think of geographical cultural backgrounds, right? Or racial cultural backgrounds. What we're talking about is cultural backgrounds, period. For example, if you go to an office and work, what you have in cultural relationship to everyone else in that freaking office is that you work for that office. When we're in high school, we're with other high schoolers. When we're in when you're in this class, right, you're with other people who are at Kingsborough that are taking online classes because it's inconvenient for you guys to take physical classes, right? So a lot of it's not about being the same, it's about going through the same things. Okay, very important, very important. Culture is not geographical; it's through experience. So, let me give you like you see all those freaking what are those called? Those are political things, right? And they're always debating back and forth. Oh, like I'm a Republican, I think this, and I'm a Democrat, I think this. What do they have in common is that they both care about politics. Does that make sense? Right? So even though they might be disagreeing, they both have similar values. Okay. All right, let's keep moving. So, culture and nature. There are biological natural urges that we share, but it is always modified by culture, right? And so if we were in class physically, I would ask you if everything natural that we do is modified by culture. If you can think of something that's natural that is not modified by culture, I'll give you an A+ in this class because there's nothing, right? Everything that we do is modified by culture, okay? And so the example I have here is health, right? So what the exercise I do in class is if you imagine when I say the word health, what do you automatically think of, right? Our image, person to person, is going to be different, right? From in class, some people think, like for me, I think about vegetables, right? Other people think about pills. Other people think about exercise. Other people think about hospitals. Other people think about healthcare. Whatever it is, people have different associations with the word health or what is healthy. And that association is built off of our experiences with that word. That's that simple. Okay. Very nice. So, culture is everywhere and everybody. Okay. Culture, as defined anthropologically, encompasses features that sometimes are considered trivial or unworthy. What that's saying is basically anthropologists really care about the boring stuff, right? And it's because through the boring stuff, that's how you really find out what people are thinking, and their general opinions about certain things, right? Or just that's where you find the gold. I like to say, right? That's where you find the stuff that really matters. So, as an exercise in graduate school, I literally just sat in a pizza place for like 2 hours and just watched people order pizza and leave and eat and stuff. And one of the things I found out was people who were tourists called cheese pizza a cheese slice, right? While people who were from New York or had been here for a long time said, "Can I get a regular slice?" Now, is this a super important finding? No, but that was only found because I recognized a pattern between certain people, right? And that's the type of stuff that anthropologists look for, because you cannot trust just what people say. People will tell you different things depending on what situation they're in, but their actions, however, are a little bit less biased. Okay, so like for example, oh, sexual harassment in the workplace. I've not seen anyone's sexual harassment policy that's soft. Zero tolerance, immediate, punishment, this and that, right? But how often do they actually receive punishment and get fired? Not very often, right? However, I guarantee you, if you go up to the boss and I don't know, you like do something crazy, like you break his computer or you slap him or something, or not even that, you just put your hand on his hand or her hand, guarantee you're going to get fired immediately, right? What's the difference there, right? Both of them, actually, in fact, they probably don't even have a very hard line policy against like assault. But I guarantee you that person who quote unquote assaulted the boss will get fired way quicker than the person who sexually harassed another person, right? So even though the words are telling you that they take sexual harassment very, very seriously, it obviously is different in reality because through their actions. And that's why it's important to look at the boring stuff. Okay. Moving on to the next one. Cultures are not haphazard collective customs and beliefs. Cultures are integrated pattern systems. If one part of the system changes, other parts also change. Culture is a system. It is not just a list of things people like and people do. Okay. So the example I have here is really good. It's women working during World War II. Okay. Now, what was the main objective of women working during World War II? Pretty straightforward. Men were at war. Women wanted to go work to earn some more money. Very, very straightforward. However, it changed America and it changed the world indirectly, right? But it changed a lot of things. It wasn't just one thing. So imagine, I don't know, like a machine, or not even a machine. Imagine yeah, I guess a machine is the closest thing, right? When you change one thing, everything else changes. So, for example, women started working, right? The purpose and the goal was just to earn more money, but a lot of things changed. The acceptability of women in the workplace changed. The acceptability of women being, in higher positions like bosses or regular workers changed. The industry, interestingly, the industry of TV dinners exploded because they had no time to, to make dinner, right? These are all things that changed just simply because women started working, right? So, when we're talking about culture changing, we're talking about systems changing. Think about the introduction of the smartphone to us, right? I don't even know if you guys are old enough to know the difference, but before smartphones, today, without a smartphone, our whole world would be different, right? Like, emails, how fast we respond to phone calls, Facebook, all that changes because of the smartphone. I remember even like MySpace and Facebook, they had to change the way that their platform was because of the introduction or because of how much people were using smartphones. Now it's very, very seamless. So again, when we talk about cultures, we're talking about things that are patterned and that change depending on one other things changing. Okay. Finally, cultures train their individual members to share certain personality traits. A set of characteristic core values integrates each culture and helps distinguish it from others. So this is kind of whatever, but I'll give you an example. Like, in America, one of the things that Americans like really value is like not following the rules, right? So if you look at like almost every movie, no one's like, oh, I followed the rules and I was successful. Everyone's always like, I broke the rules and I made this happen. In whatever context, it's like that. Okay, so that's a cultural value that Americans tend to have. All right, adaptive and maladaptive. Culture is sometimes adaptive and sometimes maladaptive. Essentially, sometimes it's good for you and sometimes it's bad for you, right? The reason why I'm putting this in here is it kind of goes back to the human imagination thing that we talked about in archaeology, where, it's culture is not something that's predictable. It is not always good and is not always bad. It changes, right? So like depending on the society, depending on what's going on, it changes. And if things were always for the good or for the bad, we would be predictable. But that's again what makes us special as humans, is that it's always, or it's never all good and never all bad. Okay. All right. Universality, generality, and particularity. Anthropologists agree that cultural learning is uniquely elaborated among humans and that all humans have culture. Anthropologists also agree that although individuals differ in their emotional and intellectual tendencies and capacities, all human populations have equivalent capacities for culture. Regardless of their genes or their physical appearance, people can learn any cultural tradition. Similar cultural causes have produced similar cultural results. So basically, when we're talking about this, what I really want to put forward here is, when people say that humans are born equal or people are equal, why? Does anyone know the reason why? Anthropology has this reason. This is why people are equal. It's because if everything that is cultural is learned, that means that anything that is cultural can be done by anybody else. Okay? So, for example, okay, like getting into Harvard, what's the first thing people say? Oh, you're so smart. Okay? Well, I'm going to tell you right now, interestingly enough, I went to graduate school at Columbia. I would not be able to get into their undergraduate program at Harvard. I might be able to get into their PhD program at Harvard, but not their undergraduate program. Isn't that crazy, right? Because what do they value at Harvard, right? Let's think about what the requirements are: personal statement, recommendations, high GPA. Those are I can get all those done, no problem. But more importantly, what? High SAT score. What if, for example, I'm not good at writing a personal statement? I can write a 20-page, research essay, but I can't write a personal statement. Then they're not going to let me in, right? Or what if I can't get through recommendations? What if I can't do this and do that? So when we're talking about equivalent of capacities for culture, that's what we're talking about. There is no such thing as something that is purely, quote unquote, testing your intelligence, or purely, quote unquote, testing your physicality or your physical abilities. Everything, and I repeat, everything is modified by culture. Everything. Okay. All right. So moving on. Cultural rules provide guidance about what to do and how to do it, but people don't always have to follow the rules. People use their culture actively and creatively rather than blindly following its dictates. So culture influences your decisions and your life. It doesn't tell you what to do. Those are two different things, right? Anthropologists find it useful to distinguish between ideal and real culture. Ideal culture consists of what people say they should do and what they say they do, and real culture refers to their actual behavior as observed by the anthropologist. And going back to the sexual harassment example, that's a perfect example. Ideal culture, they care about sexual harassment. Real culture, they don't. It's that simple, right? And in terms of that first point, it's really important to understand that culture doesn't tell us what to do; it influences us. A lot of cultures they don't let you have sex before you're married. Does that mean that people don't have sex before they're married? Of course not. They do, right? But the way they react to having sex before marriage is different. You might try to hide it. You might try to be sneaky. You might try to you might feel bad after you do it. You might not tell anybody. Whatever it is, it's the fact that there's a cultural norm of not having sex before marriage is going to influence your decision after that. Okay? Very nice. So, ethnocentrism and ethics. Ethnocentrism is a tendency to view one's own culture as superior and to apply one's own cultural values in judging the behavior and beliefs of people raised in other cultures. Cultural relativism is the opposite of that, which is the viewpoint that behavior in one culture should not be judged by the standards of another culture. Now, the extreme example of ethnocentrism is like Hitler, right? He's like, you're different from me, you need to die, we're the best, right? But in a more day-to-day way, it actually exists in all of us, but in different things, right? So for example, let's say I'm an old lady, I say this all the time, I'm an old lady, people who talk on trains are rude. Sorry, people who talk too loud on trains are rude, right? Or sorry, and they were taught to talk quietly on trains. So they could have some kids that are being a little bit loud, and they're going to start being like, oh, those kids are bad. Those kids are in gangs. Those kids are violent, whatever. When in reality, it's just that the old lady didn't like that the kids were being loud. And why didn't she like them being loud? Because she was taught that when she was younger, she was taught that she needed to be quiet on the train, right? And that is a great example of ethnocentrism. And this exists for everything, right? Oh, it shouldn't be this way. It should be this way. Generally, is ethnocentric. Generally, okay. And it's not as easy as you think to be culturally relativistic. And we're going to go over that later on. I know this is a lot of information, but these are all kind of like the core points that I want you to absorb. All right, now, mechanisms of cultural change. So how does culture change? And there's 4 little examples here, or 4 little points here. Diffusion of traits between cultures, right? Cultures never really truly been isolated. They've always exchanged. When I say exchanged, I mean like not from one territory to another territory. I mean like between households, right? On TV, on Instagram, or whatever. It's not again. It's not geographical, right? When you are with another family, you're exchanging culture involuntarily. Okay. Acculturation, which is the ongoing exchange of cultural features that result when groups have continuous first-hand contact. This is a fancy way of saying things like when you're forced to be with another group of people. Unfortunately, what acculturation is usually referring to is things like colonization, right? Because there are a lot of groups of people that don't have a choice but to exist with this new group of people. That's how, culture changes as well, right? A great example are pidgin languages, right? Like Creole. Yeah. Okay. Independent invention is the process by which humans innovate, creatively find solutions to problems. This is it is exactly what it sounds like. It's just people thinking of new ideas to deal with things. So if you guys are into politics, you know what gerrymandering is. So if you don't know already, in local politics, they do things with your district, right? They want more funding. They would want to enact this, enact that. And so what gerrymandering is purposefully breaking up the districts in certain ways so that you have a bigger voter block or that you have a certain influence or whatever. It's purposely spacing out the districts so it benefits you. That's gerrymandering. Okay, that's a great example of independent invention, changing culture. And finally, globalization, right? A series of processes that work transnationally to promote a change in a world in which all nations and people are interlinked and mutually dependent. International commerce, finance, travel, tourism, whatever, blah, 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 right? So, before in the past, can you imagine trying to learn about a new culture or like a different culture or like traveling to a different country? What a pain. You got to go to the library, check this out, and do all this other research, right? And today you just Google it or you just YouTube it and you get a bunch of information. That's an example of globalization. Another example of globalization is like businesses today are very much international. For the big companies, they have like an international way of doing things, like of how to grow, of how to operate, right? And you'd be surprised how similar businesses are now, like even across countries, because of globalization, because they want to open branches or whatever in different countries. They have a certain way of doing things that is matching each other, which in the past obviously would have never happened. Okay, so that's another mode of cultural change is globalization. Okay. All right, so coming back full circle. So what is the difference between something that's cultural and something that's natural? Okay, it's very simple. Cultural things are learned and natural things are inherited, right? And so if everything we do is learned, that means everyone is equal to a certain extent, right? I'm gonna be, are there people that are, what's it called? That are less intellectually gifted than me and you in Harvard? Absolutely. Right? Are there people that are less athletically or physically, whatever, gifted or different than that are playing professional sports? Absolutely, right? You might not think so, but in order to play basketball and play football, all these big sports, you need to have a certain body type or whatever, but you also need to have the connects to get in there, right? So it's not just about your physicality. It's not just about you being smart. It's about knowing how to do it, and that's the cultural part of it. Okay. All right. So I actually just realized that we technically have a day off on July 4th, so I might I'm going to extend the reflection due date to like Monday. But don't worry about it. It's clearly indicated on the reflection assignment. If you have any questions, just shoot me an email at raymond.fong@kbcc.qu.